Hello everybody, Jack here. I'm going to start with the 3 pros that I've experienced living in Nicaragua for 3 years, and then I'll share the 3 biggest cons. I live here, I'm way happier here, I'm much more productive here, so take that with a grain of salt, right? The first thing we're going to talk about is the cost of living. It's really hard to understand how extreme the difference in cost of living is until you've actually spent time here. If you think $4 an hour or $5 an hour is abusive pay, you will see things here that will challenge that thought. It's not enough to not work. It's enough to lift your family out of poverty. Money goes very far. I rent a house in the capital city. It is a 2-bedroom house. I live there with my fiance, and it costs us $325 a month. There's this yard with a mango tree that has infinite mangoes almost all year round, and there's people in the streets selling whatever vegetable you want at really, really cheap prices. You can live off of $10 to $15 a week if you buy local produce and cook like gallo pinto and eat local cheese. You can really live on very little here. And this slides into the next pro, which is the sense of family. I struggled in the United States to be happy, and one of the reasons for this is because there's so much focus on your job. It's like everything is second to your job. And I'm not saying all people in the US are like this. This is just my experience when I lived there. And I lived there for over a decade, right? I grew up in the United States, essentially. It's all about your job. Whenever you see somebody who hasn't seen you in a while, right away. And if you look at time spent, people in the US, we spend 8 to 10 hours a day working. And then our family, our loved ones, get our leftovers. I love the United States in a lot of ways, and I'm really glad that I had the experiences I had living there. But the detachment from what actually makes one happy is disturbing to me. And for me, it revolves around this obsession with work. Here in Nicaragua, a lot of people want more work, but people just have tons more free time. And that's the next pro. The major pro for me is that people here have free time. And this is something I didn't realize before I came to Nicaragua. I thought that basically everybody was working and everybody was working a crappy job. But that isn't actually true. Like, people here aren't as pushed to live alone. When you turn 18, you're not kicked out of your house. The norm is that you keep living with your parents until you get married or go off and live with a romantic partner. And then at some point, your parents might move in with you. That's normal here. And there's not as much pressure to just go out and figure things out for yourself like there is on individuals in the United States. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist here, because it does. But in general, it's different. It really is something that I've experienced just in romantic relationships in general. They're more interested in falling in love and getting over themselves and being together. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in the US, but in the US, we tend to get more lost in the material distraction that is just surrounding us everywhere. Now let me get into the 3 major cons, or the negative parts of living here. So the first one I want to talk about is that there's a very visible hardship. Depending where you live, most foreigners, for example, will go to another place like Esteli or Leon or San Juan. I live in Managua, I live in the capital, and a lot of foreigners don't like the capital. And you can kind of understand why visually. There's some places here that look very distraught. They look like they're suffering. You see a lot of ruined buildings and people going through trash, that kind of thing. It's totally normal. You see a lot of that kind of thing. And that can be very hard for some people. Me personally, I prefer to be confronted by it and see it because I already know it's there. But in the US, it's you see homeless people, but they're pushed away from you. They're just treated differently. Whereas here, it's more integrated. As I mentioned earlier, if you have housing, then the cost of living here is so low that if you have $30 or $40 a month of income, you can actually sustain a life that way, provided that that's just for food and you don't have expenses of like a car, rent, and that kind of thing, right? And you find that people take advantage of that. People are more likely to live together. You're more likely to live with your family, and privacy isn't as common, right? So it's harder for people to get privacy. So the next con from my perspective is the acceptance of alcoholism. I am by no means saying that alcohol isn't a problem in the United States, because it absolutely is. However, I will say that it's genuinely hard for me to find other young people who don't drink. In my experience, it is totally acceptable to drink in response to traumas and problems. It's been problematic for me in building relationships with friends and romantic relationships. Alcoholism is very common. And I believe that's simply because there isn't as much other material distraction available. As I mentioned earlier, it's quite different from in the United States. Like, material comfort is pretty rare here. You can find a lot of social comfort. People will look you in the eye, ask you meaningful questions, get to know you, and be very loving. But to find material comfort, it's harder. There's not as much. You don't see people with couches and air conditioning and nice cars and this kind of thing. It's just not really that normal. All of our societies are coming out of alcoholism. If you look at any society 50, 60 years ago, except maybe in the Middle East where it's like, totally prohibited and under the table, all societies had a lot of alcoholism. So I'm not saying that this is unique to Nicaragua. That gets into the final con, which is the extreme wealth gap in Nicaragua. When you talk to people, it's often a very different story depending on if they have some money or if they don't have money. Because there's not so much of a middle class here. It's more like you either have enough money for the things that you need and you can save up and get them, or you don't have enough for the things that you need and you can't even cover your basics. People who experience the harder end of that, the people who don't have access to money, they tend to be more resentful of being here in Nicaragua. And I'm not saying all of them are like that, not at all. But for me, it's hard seeing how often when I try and teach people to use the internet, they simply don't believe it's possible for them because they're from Nicaragua, and a part of them believes they just can't have the same opportunities, and it's really heartbreaking because it may be true that there are less opportunities available online to someone in Nicaragua, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any available, and it doesn't mean that you can't find them. You just have to look, and you have to look harder. There's this other side of the coin, and that's that $5 an hour is life-changing work here. I'm not saying it's going to just mean you don't have to work, but if you can reliably work for $5 an hour, you are financially better off than even the people you know who went to college. That's how it works here. $5 an hour is good pay. And the people who get degrees, build up really good resumes, get a lot of experience, they work towards $4, $5 an hour working full-time. It's totally different than it is in the United States. So I hope you enjoyed this video of my 3 pros and 3 cons of living in Nicaragua. Keep in mind, this is from my perspective. I'm a person who lived in a whole bunch of other places, so culture shock wasn't that much of a thing for me because I was in culture shock in the United States. So dealing with it in Nicaragua was nothing new to me. Whereas if you've spent your whole life in one place, it will feel very different for you. Very different. But I didn't think that this was worth mentioning because really these are the 3 most noticeable differences that I think are relevant to somebody who's interested in living in the country. Okay? All of the judgments, all of that societal crap, just come here, visit. There's so much crap online, and if you don't come here and experience it for yourself, you'll always have all of these just judgments, and that just aren't real. They're not true. And you can only see that by coming here yourself and actually living here. And I'm not going to say all your experiences will be positive, but living here changed my life. It's allowed me to have a much healthier lifestyle and a much more balanced lifestyle, and find somebody to fall in love with who actually values spending time together. I have someone in my life who's never going to work 8 to 10 hours a day. They always have time for me as well. And that's hard to find in the US. People who are ambitious tend to be so obsessed with giving all of their time away and working for other people, and it's tragic. It just seems so tragic. I lost my father when I was a child, and what that taught me is that you could die tomorrow, and if you have a loved one or a family member, you should be spending time with them. You don't know what's going to happen. If you don't live your life in a way where you value your family and the time you spend with them, what are you going to do when you die? Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want more of these Nicaragua videos, then please support me by checking out the Nicaragua course I have about living here. It's in the top link of the description. It's $10 to $20 depending on the sale, and it shows me that you guys want more Nicaragua content. I'm in a position where I gotta earn more money, and if I can be earning just $100 or $200 a month from making Nicaragua content because people are supporting me by buying this course, I can make a lot more of the content about whatever it is you guys want. I live here, I'm here right now, and there's a lot that I can show you. Comment below and tell me what you would like a video about. I love it when people tell me what videos I can make them. I will make you a video. Alright? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.